Well, it is that time again where we do one of these videos. This is probably my most popular series that I have ever done on this YouTube channel, where we discuss Nintendo Switch games to buy before they get out of print and become super hard to get. Now, if you haven't followed this channel, we have talked about how Nintendo Switch 1 physical games work, and how the cartridges work, and how it makes it pretty expensive to make physical games, and that there is such a unique process that goes into making physical copies of Switch games. Because of this, you end up seeing games that should not be expensive or rare on the Switch actually end up being expensive onto the system because it goes out of print fast because of the whole concept that it is trying to make a physical game out of the Nintendo Switch. And it's been a few months, so I decided to go ahead and do another one of these, as this is something that you guys have continuously asked me, where is the next part in the series where we discuss Nintendo Switch games you must buy before they become super rare. I got a nice list of games here that I think you guys will enjoy, so let's just go straight into it and talk about some Switch games. Starting off with number 10 is one that I'm honestly not sure if it's going to end up being what we think, but I wanted to put this in here as I've always liked these videos to be informative on stuff to be on the lookout for. So that being said, I have put Super Mario Galaxy 1+2 onto this list. You might be asking yourself, Max, why do you have this onto the list? Well, if you haven't followed the news when this game came out, it was being reported that GameStop, Target, Walmart, all of these retailers in stores were not going to have much of this game and that it was going to sell out. And now it's been out for about a day when I am recording this video. And it looks like some stores did not get much, but there are some stores that did get a lot. So I don't really know how much to put into this report. However, it was coming from some credible people. So I think it's important to point out that maybe this is something you guys should be on the lookout for getting if it's something that you are interested in. I expect that this game will be well stocked throughout the holiday season, but when it comes to after the holiday season, I'm not really sure. This isn't like 3D All-Stars where it's gonna stop and be out of sale by the end of March, but I also know that this was a controversial release for Nintendo, and I feel like Nintendo was trying to do like a fear of missing out by having those reports go out. So I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if this is something that Nintendo wants to keep actively stock of. It's just one of those things. I wanted you guys to be on the lookout for it potentially though, if that report was there, and I just like to be an informed person. My honest opinion, I think now seeing it in store, I don't think it's going to be as bad as we initially thought. Or it might just be a combination that this ended up being so controversial that people did not want to buy the game. And that's why it looks like it's well stocked, when the reality is that it actually wasn't stocked well and people aren't buying it. I don't know, just a few things to throw out there. Okay, let's get this one out of the way. Pac-Man World 2 Repack. Now, you might be noticing something with what I'm holding. It's the Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game. And that's why I'm putting this onto the list. I'm not telling you guys to buy the Nintendo Switch 2 version, but I am saying that the existence of the Nintendo Switch 2 version is probably going to make the Switch 1 version go out of print. If you don't notice, the Nintendo Switch 2 version is actually a game keycard, which is obviously the most controversial thing about the Switch 2, in my opinion, is game keycards. But the Switch 1 edition of this game does have it all on cartridge. However, I don't expect that Bandai Namco is making much of the Switch 1 version, as they want more people to buy this since this is the newer version of the game out there. But of course, there's so much controversy surrounding game keycards that everyone is going to lean towards the Switch 1 version of the game, which I don't think that Bandai Namco is going to make another run of Pac-Man World 2 for the Switch 1 when that initial stock sells out. As we talked about before, there are extreme guidelines when it comes to making physical games for the Switch, and especially when it comes to reprinting a cartridge. And I expect that Bandai is going to stop once that initial thing sells out, and they're going to be pushing this version out there more to people. One thing I want to highlight is I do think you're going to be fine probably for the first 6 months of this game. This game just came out. I don't see it selling out anytime soon. But I think once we get into that mid next year timeline, that will probably be a time that you should really look to be getting this game, which fortunately enough, it's 30 bucks. So that's also an incredible game. So obviously these are videos that we speculate stuff. And for this next one, I'm really going to put the tinfoil hat on. As I've said many times before, don't use these videos as facts. This is all just speculating. That's always what these videos have been. And with this next one, this is just going to prove further that this is just us speculating. But the next one that I have on this list is Nicktoons The Dice of Dynasty. Now, the reason why this is on this list is because of the fact that a Switch 2 edition of this game does not exist. And if you play this on the Switch 2 hardware, you are going to notice some issues. It's the same issues that you will see when you play Shinobi onto the Switch 2. And that's the resolution onto the screen, the sprites, all that looks weird onto the Switch 2 screen. And there has been rumors floating that Game Mill Entertainment was trying to get a Switch 2 dev kit for this game. That way it can have a Switch 2 edition at launch. But if you haven't been following the news with the dev kits, those are extremely hard to get right now. And it looks like they probably did not get one, considering that this has no Switch 2 update. My reason in bringing all of this up, if Game Mill Entertainment is able to get a Switch 2 kit, I expect them to re-release this game onto the Switch 2 as a game keycard. Game Mill Entertainment has had a history of releasing Nintendo Switch physical games later down the road. They did it with The Walking Dead Destinies. I think they did it with King Kong. There's been a few of the games that the Switch physical copy comes out later. And I think history could repeat itself with the Switch 2 physical if that game gets a Switch 2 edition. And obviously, as we talked about with Pac-Man, there is so much controversy with the game keycards that I think a lot of people are going to gravitate going to get the Switch 1 physical copy. But something to highlight, once again, this is just me speculating. There has been nothing concrete out there saying that a Switch 2 edition is happening. There's been rumors, and I'm just saying if that ends up happening, I could see that happening with this being a hard to find game down the road whenever that Switch 2 edition happens. This next one is a very weird one. That's going to be Funko Fusion Deluxe Edition. Now, once again, this is probably one that has a lot of you questioning why is this onto the list. There's a few reasons why that this is on here. Let's first start off with one of the obvious reasons. Funko Fusion runs absolutely horrible onto the Nintendo Switch. In fact, it was so bad that they actually canceled the Funko Fusion physical copy for the Nintendo Switch. The game got delayed so many times, it eventually released digitally, and then the physical kept getting delayed, and then at one point they just flat out canceled it because of the mediocre reviews that this game was getting, on top of how bad the Switch version was getting in terms of reviews. And these Switch physical copies are very expensive to make happen, so it makes sense why they canceled it. And then out of nowhere, they announced that Funko Fusion is getting a new edition of the game on all platforms, that being this deluxe edition that adds more content into the game. Here's where things get weird though. They announced that the physical copy of the deluxe edition would only be available for the Nintendo Switch. The other platforms are not getting a physical copy, which is kind of weird considering that the Switch version is getting so much hate for how bad it runs onto the Switch, and the fact that they went through and made the physical copy of this, let alone the deluxe edition being only for the Switch. It's just such a weird release, and I think that this is going to be one that no one wants, and then a few years from now, they're going to be like, wait, Funko Fusion released onto the Switch, and then that's when people will be like, oh, yeah, we need to get that one, and that's how it spikes. A lot of these licensed games typically do something like that, and I see that happening with Funko Fusion a few years from now. My last reason for this is I don't think that many copies of this game exist, because I went to a GameStop the day that this came out. They had no pre-orders. In fact, they only got one, and they told me after selling me this one, they were not going to be getting any more of Funko Fusion. That just wasn't allowing them to order more. So this was it. Next up on the list is one that I am surprised got a physical copy, and that is Tales of the Shire. Now, the reason why this is on the list is kind of similar to Funko Fusion. This game got reviewed very poorly onto the Nintendo Switch, and it surprised people that they actually ended up making a physical copy of this game despite the poor reviews that the Switch version got. I will say, speaking from experience, it was really hard for me to find this game, and every time that I went to a GameStop, they told me that they sold out and wasn't getting any more in. I finally went to one GameStop and they were like, oh, we have one left. And if you noticed, it's not actually sealed, but I paid the new sticker price because this was the last copy once again. And I don't see this game getting a reprint once they initially sell out. One of the reasons is because it's done by IM 8-bit. And on top of that, it is a game that runs horrible onto the Switch. And they probably don't really care about the fact that they made this because they were probably expecting this to be a good game for the Switch when IM 8-bit decided to do the physical copy for it. And I think the Lord of the Rings fans are going to gravitate wanting to get this down the road, and that's going to be how it sells out. And then out of nowhere, it just spikes up and it's not gonna get a reprint because the game sucks on the Switch. This next one is one that I am surprised has a physical, because it really should have got a physical here in America and somehow it ended somewhere else. That game ends up being Jump King. If you have not heard about Jump King, this game is extremely popular to stream. It is the ultimate rage game, essentially. And it headed to other consoles later down, and when it originally released on PC, as it became so popular that people wanted it on consoles. And so it eventually landed onto the Switch. Here's the weird part. I'm pretty sure that this game is super popular here in America. I think that's where it's the most popular at, but I might be wrong about this. But somehow the physical copy of it never ended up here in America. It ended up in Japan, and I was surprised to see that the Switch version got a physical copy. On top of that, the Switch version is the only one to have gotten a physical copy, which also surprises me. Now, this game I don't think is necessarily hard to find. I think it's definitely out of print now because this is one that came out already a few years ago. However, it is starting to slowly spike up in value. This is a game that used to be $30 physically, and now more and more people are trying to buy it, and I want to let you guys know now before it spikes even further. Not to mention, it's actually a pretty crazy game, so you'll probably have a fun time streaming it or playing it with friends. Next one on the list is going to be brain training for the Nintendo Switch. Now, again, this is a very weird one to put onto the list, but I feel like I have very good reasoning for it. First of all, this game came here to America. In fact, it is actually a Nintendo IP. You will see the character from Brain Age within this game. It's a Brain Age game, essentially. But what's weird about this game, while it came here to America, it did not get a physical release. The physical release ended up everywhere else from my understanding. I think Japan got one, but the UK got one, which was really weird to me because I would have thought with how popular Brain Age is here in America, they would have wanted to put it over here. But that's not the case at all. As more people start to collect for the Nintendo Switch, I think that mainly people are wanting to go for those Nintendo first-party games. And so when they look over the list of Nintendo published games, I think they're going to notice that this is on that list, and I think a lot of people are going to want to pick that up because of Nintendo publishing the game. I mean, it's a Nintendo IP on top of that, so it makes sense why they published it. But I think all of this will add to why people will want to get this. On top of that, it's not exactly an expensive game to get, but it's not the cheapest thing to buy. You will see this game run from $30 to $35, which, considering what the game is and how long it's been out, I think is kind of high for this. So I definitely think this is one to be on the lookout for. This next one is, again, another one that we're just speculating about, and that's going to be the new Ninja Gaiden game. Now, this is on the Switch 1. It does not have a Switch 2 edition. However, it works onto the Switch 2. There has been talks about a Switch 2 edition happening, but similar to what we talked about before, the developers have not been able to get a development kit because every developer is trying to get a Switch 2 kit and Nintendo did not make enough. And I have speculation that once they get that development kit, they're going to make a totally new version and release it physically as a game keycard. Although I will say it's possible when it comes to this developer that they might not release it physically. It might just be a free Switch 2 edition that comes to the game, and they won't worry about a physical copy due to all the controversy surrounding game keycards. But if that does end up happening, I think a lot of people are going to gravitate trying to get the Switch 1 version since it is fully on cartridge besides the Switch 2 edition of it. Again, it's one of those things like we talked about with Nicktoons. This is one that we're just speculating, and I think with how cheap that you can get this game right now, it's definitely one to be on the lookout for. This one I have here just because of the obscurity of this game. That game is date everything. This is a game that you literally can date whatever you want into the game. Like, for example, I'm looking at my chair right now. If my chair was in that game, you could date the chair. I mean, I think it even highlights the fact that like you could date a house. Like, it's all sorts of obscurity stuff into this game. And the fact that this got a physical copy really surprises me. But this is a game that is starting to gain a lot more popularity behind it. And because of that, I think a lot of people are going to want to get that physical copy once they realized it. And I will say that, again, similar stories. This one's starting to sell out at places. I had to go to 3 different GameStops to find this. And if you notice, it's again the new sticker. So this was the last copy. It didn't come sealed. So I don't know. It might already be out of print. This next one is one that I think could end up being hard to find, but it's going to take a few years. That game being the Power Rangers beat 'em up game. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is this onto the list? One of the reasons is that this is a IP that is not owned by the developers that made this. So this is one that uses a license. And I think with Power Rangers, from my understanding, there's a lot of stuff going on with the Power Rangers license. I think it's partially owned by Hasbro. I thought Nickelodeon had some of it. I don't really know what's going on with the IP, but I feel like at some point the license is going to expire to the developers that made this, and it's going to be taken off all digital stores. And I think that's when people are going to be like, oh, I should have bought the physical. It's gonna be like a Scott Pilgrim story all over again. I just think it's gonna take 4 or 5 years from now. So probably not one that you wanna get right away. It's still easy to find, and I don't think there was a lot of popularity surrounding this Power Rangers game. So it's still pretty cheap, I think, to get. Guys, that was 10 games that I think you guys should be on the lookout for when it comes to the Nintendo Switch to buy before they become super rare. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on the list that we talked about today. You can tell me what you feel that's going to be right, what's going to be wrong. If you have some suggestions of what should have been on this list, let's just talk about it all. I know a lot of people like to talk about a lot of speculation into comments when it comes to these type of videos, and I'm all for it. I'll definitely read it because it's just a nice discussion to see. Guys, make sure to backslash that subscribe button, like the video, check out the Twitter, Discord, Instagram, all that good stuff that's in the description below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace. What time is it? Wow. It is 1:28 in the morning. I've been having to do a lot of extra videos because when this comes out, I'll be in Arkansas, so yeah, well, I should probably just hit the end record button.